Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's debate. My name is Ned Wheaton, and I'm the chairman, and Shanae Young is the timekeeper. The adjudicator is Mr. Morton. The topic of this debate is that driverless cars are a really bad idea. The affirmative team seated to my right is from Pembroke School. The negative team seated to my left is from Cabra Dominican College. The speaking time for this debate is 5 minutes. A single warning bell will sound 1 minute before the speaking time.
Ding.
And a double bell will sound at the speaking time. A continuous bell may be rung 30 seconds after the speaking time, in which case the speaker must sit down immediately. Please ensure that your mobile phones and other electronic devices are switched off.
It's probably very important that I go off during the filming.
I declare this debate open and call upon the first affirmative speaker, Matthew Drown.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for tonight's debate is that driverless cars are a really bad idea. We interpret the topic to mean that driverless cars, or automobiles which can be driven without a human controlling them, except for entering a destination or route, should not be integrated onto the roads people currently travel by because of the negative implications which may result. We, as the affirmative team, firmly concur with this statement. Today, as the first speaker, I'll be talking to you about 3 points. I shall first speak about the potential issues which will arise should driverless cars be made available to the public. I will then proceed to speak about the integration of driverless cars in today's society, and finally explain that hacking poses a great threat to privacy and safety. Our second speaker will be talking to you about the ethical issues with programming the driverless cars and how to sort out ethical dilemmas like killing one person to save another and such. She will also talk about how driverless cars will put numerous people out of their jobs, further increasing the already high unemployment. Our third speaker shall rebut and sum up our team case. If driverless cars were to be sold to the public, several issues would arise. The first of these is insurance. If an accident were to occur in which a driverless car had a crash or hit a pedestrian, who would be to blame? The manufacturer, the pedestrian, the passengers? What if there were no passengers? The future of driverless cars is that they will be able to drop a passenger somewhere and drive home or to another destination without any occupants, like a personal taxi but without a driver. If a car is travelling with no one inside it and it is involved in a road accident, how would the insurance be dealt with? Who will be to blame? The implementation of driverless cars onto roads brings up issues such as this. My second point is about how the integration of driverless cars onto our roads would not be an easy task. Yes, once only driverless cars are on the roads, there should be few issues with how they work, but once they are still being transitioned in, issues will certainly arise. In July of this year, just 2 months ago, an autonomous vehicle crashed into a truck, killing the car's owner. Tesla, the company which manufactured the driverless car involved in the accident, have said that the event was caused by the autopilot in the car failing to recognize the truck against the bright sky. But the real issue isn't the car, it's the passenger. As the truck driver involved in the accident said, the owner of the vehicle was playing Harry Potter on the TV screen, and Sergeant Kim Monte has disclosed that a portable DVD player was found in the car. The passenger wasn't even paying attention to the road, and he might have been able to save his own life had he been. The autonomous car was fitted with manual controls, as can be seen in images of the car, and yet they were completely disregarded because they weren't required. This is the issue. If driverless cars are brought onto roads, will there be separate laws governing these cars to the rest? There are simply too many changes in the way cars and roads will operate, and although this may not be an issue when every car on the road is driverless, what happens until then? Will there be separate lanes for the different types of cars? This would ruin countless systems. Intersections would be a nightmare if this were the case. Many roads rely on a car being in a certain lane to travel in a certain direction, and roads can't very well be expanded. There are buildings in the way of this, and the cost and time would be unimaginable. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no way that driverless cars can be both easily and safely integrated into society. My final point is about just how terrible driverless cars could be if they are hacked. Since autonomous vehicles communicate with each other and share information, it will be easy to retrieve information about where a car is travelling or what route it is taking. This violation of the Privacy Act is also potentially quite dangerous, as cars could be followed. Hackers could essentially know where someone is at all times based off the activity of their car. In today's society, nothing is truly safe. A group of Virginia-based researchers have recently been testing the security of driverless cars and found that it was simple to hack them. David Drescher, the CEO of Mission Secure, stated that we have successfully demonstrated that you can easily attack braking and acceleration and other automated features added to cars. And the thought of a 2-ton box of metal being remotely controlled by someone with an ill intention is frightening. Anyone capable of hacking these vehicles has the power to take not only the lives of the occupants of the cars, but anyone they pass as well. But I thought driverless cars were supposed to reduce deaths on roads. Maybe they will reduce the accidental death rates, but intentional death rates have the potential to increase dramatically if driverless cars are made available to the public. And so, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, we as the Affirmative team are strongly of the opinion that driverless cars are a really bad idea because of the issues associated with driverless cars being made available to the public, the fact that there is no easy and safe way to integrate driverless cars onto our roads, and that the hacking of autonomous vehicles poses a great threat not only to people's privacy but also their lives.
First next speaker, Bridget Woodman.
Good evening, Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for our debate is that driverless cars are a really bad idea. We, the negative team, believe this statement to be false. Today, as first speaker, I'll be talking to you about the idea and benefits of the driverless car and our advancing technology. Our second speaker, Lucy, will be talking about the economic benefits of driverless cars and the ethics of these machines. Our third speaker, Lana, will rebut and sum up our case. We disagree with the definition set by the Affirmative team and propose a new definition. We define this topic as a driverless car being a fully autonomous vehicle. An ideas class is something that is a thought or suggestion as to the possible course of action. An idea is seen as a prospect that does not have any benefits for humankind. This is saying that fully autonomous vehicles as an idea have no benefit for us, but this is just not the case. Now to my rebuttal. The first speaker talked to you about hacking. At current times, yes indeed, technology can be unreliable in regards to hacking, but as our technology advances and humanity adapts ideas that can stop such problems, we can reduce these hacking cases. Because this is merely an idea at the moment, and as time passes, we can keep adapting on this. That is why we don't currently have the cars that are driverless. The speaker also said integration would not be an easy task. This will be slow. Each person will slowly be added, will have to add these cars to the road. But the cars can still stop and sense the normal cars around them. Now to my first point. The world revolves around ideas. The phone in your pockets, shoes on your feet, and chairs that you sit upon are all based on ideas of others. Much like the idea of the driverless car. Every idea is based on adapting and improving our current lives. We have come to a point where many ideas are based on the efficiency, safety, and improvement of society. This directly relates to the driverless car. Driverless cars are an idea that have grown due to many different variables. One of the most prevalent reasons is the inefficiency of our current vehicles and human error that leads to countless accidents. 1.2 million people every year are killed by car accidents from human error, as stated by ASIRT. The driverless car will encourage less drink driving because the action of driving and drinking will be impossible due to the car's automatic driving function. This in itself will decrease the 10,000 dying per year because of drunk driving. The driverless car will not be able to speed, take reckless chances, or send a text at the wheel. In short, driverless cars will be a lot safer than current cars because human error will be almost eradicated. Another important variable is enabling the disabled and elderly to drive. Many families with a disabled person often struggle when leaving their home, and most of the elderly never leave their house due to lack of confidence. So why do we leave parts of society shackled to their own home? Do they not deserve the same liberty and freedom we are given? If driverless cars give the opportunity for unable citizens to have the confidence to go places, we should most definitely give it consideration. The benefits of the driverless car can go on to improve the safety of our roads, reduce mobility costs, combat climate change, and so on. With the constantly rising accounts of error, accidents, and inefficiency, the idea of the driverless car is the next step. The idea of the driverless car must be pondered and tested in order to be successful, but those are the steps that must be undertaken. This leads me to my next point, our advancing technology. Technology is constantly advancing and humanity must keep up. In only the past 20 years, we have reached the most technologically advanced point throughout history. We must take advantage of our technological advances in order to make the world a better place. Our Earth could better in most aspects, including medical use, work availability, and convenience using our fast advancing technology. This directly leads to the use of driverless cars. We have the technology available to conduct the manufacturing of driverless cars, but variables such as the fear of technology continues to hold us back. Fears surrounding technology have been prevalent for centuries. If revolutionary ideas from the past were shut down based on their first or second prototype, or if they had an opportunity to complete all the safety testing, we might have never had inventions like the regular car, like the airplane, like the rocket out of space, all of which have had changed the world. This is not only prevalent in the invention of vehicles, but in many other significant inventions, including the camera, radio, airplane, telephone, etc. Where would we be if we had stopped these ideas? Humanity can't continue to fear the unknown. With the help of the driverless car, we can continue to learn, adapt, and change for the better of society. Ladies and gentlemen, Chairman, as Socrates stated himself, the secret of change is to focus all your energy not on fighting the old, but building the new. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chairman. The topic for tonight's debate is that driverless cars are a really bad idea. We, as the Affirmative team, strongly believe the statement to be true. We would like to accept the new definition given by the negative team. However, we would like to clarify that the definition should also include the integration of driverless cars onto our roads. Before I continue my speech, I would like to point out some flaws in the opposition's argument. The first speaker on the negative team has told you that the integration of driverless cars will not be hard. This is incorrect because there are still issues with these cars and there will be with integration of them. Our first speaker has already spoken on one of these issues about how a driverless car crashed into a truck. She also spoke about that drunk driving is not a problem and accidents due to human error will decrease. Driverless cars will not solve this complex problem, and in fact they will only encourage people to perform irresponsible actions because they are able to get away with it. Not to mention the fact that these cars can't read minds and they require input for travel. And when one is completely intoxicated or otherwise, how reliable is your input going to be? And where you might end up when you're making these decisions under the influence of alcohol. Driverless cars don't make us any less danger to ourselves, and that is why they are a really bad idea. Our first speaker, Matt, has already spoken about the negative impact making driverless cars available to the public may have, such as issues with ensuring the driverless cars, changes in policies or legislations, and possible hacking and privacy issues. Today, I will be speaking on the ethics of humans and machines and issues in employment that driverless cars will cause. First of all, machines are programmed. They follow a certain code telling them what to do and how to react to certain circumstances. Furthermore, machines are not run by the same moral code as humans unless it is inputted really specifically. What happens when they are faced by unexpected situations? Situations that have not been programmed into their software. For example, if a car was driving along and an unfortunate set of events causes the car to head towards a crowd of 10 people crossing the road, and it cannot stop in time, but it can avoid killing those 10 people by steering into a nearby wall. However, this collision would cause the death of the occupants of the car. What should it do? What if it was only one person crossing the road? Or what if it had to swerve into another person in order to avoid killing those 10 people? A study by the University of Cornell shows that the majority of people, 76% of people, would prefer the car to minimise loss of life by swerving and killing the occupants of the car. However, this made them much less likely to buy a driverless car themselves. The study itself states, it appears that people praise utilitarian, self-sacrificing autonomous vehicles and welcome them on the road without actually wanting to buy one for themselves. This shows that while people may enjoy the fantasy of driverless cars, they do not want to face the reality behind it. Furthermore, robots are incapable of emotions. They are unaffected by loss and only follow their coding. Therefore, they cannot be seen fit as responsible for someone's life, as it holds no value to them. And therefore, they should not be able to decide for humans. This means that driverless cars are a bad idea and should not be allowed out on roads. Speaking of ethics, what about our ethics? According to the Australian government, there are 34,500 people that are employed as bus or coach drivers, 39.6 thousand as taxi drivers, and 46,000 in delivery services. And that's in Australia alone. If driverless cars become part of our society, there will no longer be need for these jobs, and these people will be put out of work. Unemployment levels will rise dramatically. Are we okay with forcing these people out of work? If so, are we not just like machines, disregarding the thousands of people employed in these fields? And how far exactly will this technology extend? How many jobs, how many people are we willing to sacrifice? In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chairman, we, the Affirmative team, believe that driverless cars are a really bad idea because of the ethical decisions they are unable to make and due to the sheer number of people they will disadvantage. Therefore, if we want to steer ourselves onto the road to success, we should avoid introducing driverless cars onto our roads.
I call upon the second negative speaker, Lucy Hasseltine.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, adjudicator and opposition. My name is Lucy and I'm your second negative speaker for this evening's debate. As the first affirmative team stated, that if a car was to be crashed, who would be to blame? We propose that if it came down to it, the person who owns the car would still be blamed, just like current laws. This would still mean that we are showing equality. He also stated that hacking and unreliability would be unstable. Unreliability of technology is a major question, but it will still no longer be a problem for driverless cars. As the technology is still being experimented, in order for it to be successful, harsh testing will still be needed. We can only move forward with the idea to improve the idea, meaning progressing like our first speaker talked about. The second speaker talked about how is the car ethical as they are not. This moral dilemma cannot be simply answered as the human nor the driverless cars themselves, as will be further explained. As the second affirmative speaker stated, that driverless cars are not controlled by the same emotions we are. Whilst we acknowledge this statement is true, if a driverless car was then in an unfortunate crash or situation, it would be fully responsible for the death and emotions rather than the driver, meaning that, the driver then can't experience the emotions of killing a person. Tonight, our first speaker talked about where the idea for driverless car was established and how we are progressing globally. I will talk about the positive economic outcomes driverless cars will introduce and the ethics of a driverless car. Our third speaker will rebut and sum up our case. Now to my first point. Whether the idea for driverless cars are implemented or thrown to the curb, the job market is still going to evolve or change. More advancements will be made in the terms of technology and what society needs. The question of how many jobs we have and how many jobs we haven't got has been around forever, since the Industrial Revolution. We have learnt to cope. For example, people in the fields had to adapt in the lives in the factories. They then had to find a way to get around the loss of their jobs due to factories becoming machine dependent. But the people found a way to work and a will to survive. They found new jobs because the technological advancements opened new windows and new opportunities for new experiences, employment and income. Driverless cars will do the same. We won't lie, a few jobs will be lost, but this is minuscule in comparison to the jobs created through software and servicing. Another economically financial benefit is the greatly reduced mobility costs that will come through the use of car sharing, meaning that a car that can drive a passenger to their destination does not need to wait until the passenger needs it again. It can drive others in the meantime. www.inventive.co states that whenever you need a car, it will arrive at your doorsteps within a few minutes. Initially, this would be a vital service for urban areas in which many residents don't own a car. So as these services grow, and as network effects kick in, the cost of renting will fall dramatically. It would then not take long until the cost will fall below the cost of owning. This will entice more and more consumers to stop buying their own cars and rely on shared car ownership. This will lead into a huge economic, lifestyle and resource conservation benefits for society. Now to my next point. We know that as humans we face difficult decisions that lean upon our morals and ethics, but what happens when this decision is put in the hands of a machine? This is one of the biggest hurdles we as a society must jump in order to think about implementing this, being the driverless car. For example, a car drives down a street, a frail old man suddenly steps into the path from the right. Simultaneously, a child steps into the path from the left. It's too late to brake. If the car swerves to the right, the old man dies, the child lives. If the car swerves to the left, the old man lives, the child dies. If it continues straight ahead, both will die. What is the ethically correct decision? According to Driverless Future, the answer is that there is no ethically correct decision, as no human could decide between killing an old man, a child, or even both of them. Now imagine the decision for a driver. Imagine the life of guilt that comes from the decision they have to make. Imagine having to second-guess themselves for the rest of their lives. That is a big burden for any driver. Now imagine a driverless car. It calculates speed, distance, and many other factors that a driver not be able to decipher in split seconds, whilst also determining the course of least impact. However, in this instance, yes, it may be unfortunate that one of those individuals is hit, but it removes the burden of guilt associated with the decision. Nothing can be perfect, and faults will happen due to uncertain variables. But the driverless car will reduce the faults created by unexpected events because humans will not be able to change and adjust to quick-time accidents, just like a falling branch. And although someone in this instance may die, with or without a driver, at least with a driverless car there is less likelihood of accidents through poor decision-making and less blame when there are fatal accidents. So overall, I can confidently say that driverless cars are a good thing as they have so many positive economic outcomes and remove ethical dilemmas for driverless cars. Thank you.
I call upon the third affirmative speaker, Annika Turon-Sanders.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for tonight's debate is that driverless cars are a really bad idea. We, as the Affirmative team, strongly believe this statement to be true. I would first like to point out some flaws in my opposition's argument before I sum up my team's case. The first speaker spoke about how technology is the future. Ladies and gentlemen, we wholeheartedly agree. Technology is a future we cannot resist. However, we would like to raise the question, is it the future we should be aiming for? Technological warfare is growing more advanced day by day. Can this be argued as peaceful and beneficial steps towards a brighter future? Are driverless cars not the same, with the ever-present threat of hacking, and which is a worrying one? As our second speaker stated, a group of researchers in Virginia proved just how unprotected these cars are when they hacked into one of the vehicles and took it for a joyride. This has been reported by the National Defense magazine, who raises concerns about how safe these cars truly are and if it's a step towards the future that we shouldn't be taking. The first speaker also spoke about how driverless cars will enable disabled and elderly people to have more freedom. This may be true, however, we would like to ask, what happens in an emergency? Will just anyone be allowed to commute in a fast-moving and dangerous vehicle? By law, pilots are required to have sufficient training in controlling the machine that they operate, as they are responsible not only for their lives, but the lives of others. In a situation where the autopilot doesn't work, the pilot has no problem making up for the machine's mistakes. So shouldn't drivers, in an automated car or not, be physically able to handle any situation where the computer fails them, as they are also responsible for the lives of people on the roads as well as their own. Not to mention the fact that these people already have ways to travel, through buses and taxis and other modes of transport that people make their livelihoods from. Where will driverless cars leave these individuals whose job it is to transport others? This is exactly why driverless cars are the flat tire of ideas. The first speaker also talked about how robots don't make errors. On the contrary, robots do make errors. Robots are not perfect because they have been designed by imperfect creatures, us. Requirements writers and software designers are not perfect and in no way can be. They both suffer from the inherent limitations and errors of the human mind and of logic itself. If any kind of automation is to be worth trusting, much greater thought should be given to the fact that the human mind is riddled with limitations. Limitations that will only be passed on to the machines we build. A perfect example of this is the recent and fatal accident of a driverless car. As mentioned by our first speaker, the Tesla vehicle mistook the white side of a truck for a brightly lit sky and drove directly into that truck. The company has reported now that the instance has occurred. They will be able to reprogram it so that it does not happen again. However, we would like to ask, how many mistakes will be made before driverless cars can stop making them? The second speaker talked about how the owner of a driverless car would still be blamed in an accident. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no way to determine who is to blame, as there is no precedence to a situation such as this. If in an empty car, is it not the car's fault itself? The fact that we have no answer to this is why they are a bad idea. The second speaker also talked about how cars can make better ethical decisions and how there's not really a correct ethical answer. While ethics are always questionable, we should not be putting the lives of people in an emotionless machine. Just because the driver is freed from the burden of guilt doesn't mean we should be letting machines handle ethics, a very human decision. To summarise, our first speaker, Matt, gave us some compelling arguments about the issues of insurance and how the road infrastructure we currently have is not compatible with the fantasy of driverless cars. He went on to speak about hacking and privacy issues, detailing how easy it is to remotely control one of these vehicles. Our second speaker talked to us about the important issue of ethics and how humans are only able to make ethical decisions and that robots should not be responsible for people's lives. She went on to talk about how we're considering putting hundreds of thousands of people's livelihoods at stake. In conclusion, while driverless cars are a promising fantasy, the reality is that our society is not capable with dealing with these machines. Hacking, insurance, and most importantly, ethics are all very serious issues that need to be solved before we consider self-driving cars. If we want to pave the way for future generations and show them the road to success, then maybe we should put the idea of driverless cars back into the garage and seriously consider their ramifications. Thank you.
I call upon the third negative speaker, Alana Howard.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, adjudicated and opposition. My name is Alana and I am your third negative speaker for this evening's debate. Tonight's debate is that driverless cars are a really bad idea. We as a negative team firmly disagree with this statement. As the first speaker stated, there is an increased chance of hacking and the cars are easily hackable, but we still have the chance to change this. Unreliability in the terms of hacking of technology is a major question, but it will no longer be a problem for driverless cars. This car is an idea, a process, a way to change the world. The technology for the car is still being experimented. In order to be successful, vigorous testing is something that the pioneers of the driverless car are still currently doing and need to do. We can only move forward from this point and continue to improve the idea to correlate with our needs as humans in regards to safety, efficiency, etc. We have the opportunity to iron out all bumps in this design. The first affirmative speaker also stated, who would be to blame if there is no driver? And how will assurance be handled if there is no one in the car? This is not a question that needs to be asked. Who is to blame? If it all came down to it, the person that owns the car would be blamed. This is not just the laws and legalities of the situation. It's like if a dog owner's dog attacked a person and caused harm, the owner would have to pay. But this is only a small subsection of the debate for driverless cars. It doesn't have anything to do with the running of the car, the efficiency, or the benefits of the driverless car. It is only there as a net and a law that will not change. But is this small and irrelevant question going to stop us from implementing an amazing piece of technology that can help the many and be a revolution for humanity? stated that laws would have to change and be separate. Laws have always been around and have constantly been changing, yes. With the introduction of driverless cars, we will have to change laws, like drink driving. But isn't this for the better? People are no longer drink driving or texting while driving with the introduction of the driverless car. And with this introduction, new laws will have to be processed in conjunction with the cars and how they work. But laws that are basic and laws that are ethically correct will not change. Killing someone will not become legal. And the changing of a few laws will be just one thing we have to do in exchange for a start to independence for the disabled and the elderly, and the reducing of lives lost through driving. They also stated that we have a lot of things to change. But as a society, we have constantly been changing, thinking of ways to become better and make our lives easier and fairer. The driverless car is another way to expand and help humanity to do their work better, become better people, and get the most that they can out of life. Think about it. We have always been adapting since the beginning of time. Neanderthals had to adapt to farm, then build. They had to form a language, and years later, it made life more. It's so important to us now, our ability to speak. But if our human primates didn't learn to change, then where would we be? We had the Industrial Revolution, the horse and the cart, the light bulb, telescopes, all ideas that formed into something that created change, and this change was revolutionary for humankind. So why should we stop this idea, when it has so many benefits for humankind? And yes, we do agree that the process will be hard and tedious to integrate this, but there are small steps that must be taken in order to benefit from the driverless cars. As the second affirmative team speaker stated, she asked how many people we are willing to sacrifice in a job sense. We are willing to sacrifice a small amount of people if it means that we can get so many more jobs and so many people out there in the workforce through technology and software for the driverless cars. She also outlined the problem with programming. But this programming gives a way to a revolution, to a way that makes roads and driving smooth, using algorithms. That means each move is perfect. The reflex of a car is much quicker than a human's. The second speaker also stated that driverless cars encourage people to perform unreliable actions. Just because a person decides to be unreliable, this is not the driverless car's being. And why should unreliable people be the downfall of a vehicle that can change the world? Tonight, our first speaker has talked to you about the idea and benefits of the driverless car, including human error being reduced and increased safety being the stem for this idea. She also talked about our advancing technology. Our second speaker has talked to you about the economic benefits of driverless cars and the ethics of these machines. I, as third speaker, have summed up our debate. And I will end with a little quote stated by Martin Bellum. We still tend to describe these new vehicles as driverless cars, defining them by what they don't have, just as the horse's carriage seized control of our roads a century or more ago. But people in the Middle Ages didn't know they were living in the Middle Ages. And as I stood by that roadside, watching all these inefficiently routed cars containing people that had to be fully attentive on controlling them, and knowing that they were poisoning me as I stood, I thought of that phrase again. Truly, we can look to the future of the car right now and know that we are currently in the Middle Ages of mechanised personal transport for the driverless car. Thank you.